at this time, the people would ask that Mr. Simpson step forward and try on the glove recovered at Bundy as well as the glove recovered at Rockingham.
Welcome to Watch Mojo. And today we're counting down our picks for the most significant pieces of evidence that were meant to help convict defendants, but either during trial or upon appeal, actually played a pivotal role in their acquittal.
When you apply real science, justice is done, but they didn't do that in the beginning. They jumped to some conclusion based on a fraud.
Number 10, calling card, the Hall Mills murder trial.
What would become one of the most famous crime cases of the 20th century.
On September 16, 1922, the bodies of Reverend Edward Hall and his choir member Eleanor Mills were discovered in a field in Somerset, New Jersey. The cruel nature of the crime, plus the fact that both victims were having an affair, placed suspicion on Hall's wife Frances. At the crime scene, police found a calling card, later determined to contain the fingerprints of Frances's brother Willie. Investigators charged Frances and her brothers with the murders, making this calling card the main physical evidence during their trial. However, the card had been mishandled by the police. It was passed around among reporters and curious onlookers at the crime scene, severely contaminating it. Consequently, the jury acquitted the defendants, leaving the case unsolved to this day.
100 years later, fascination with the case endures.
Number 9, needle tainted with insulin, Klaus von Bülow attempted murder trial. When American socialite Sonny von Bülow was found unconscious on her bathroom floor in December 1980, suspicion fell on her husband Klaus. Medical tests soon revealed that Sonny had low blood sugar but a high insulin level. While Sonny lay in a coma, Klaus was convicted of her attempted murder.
Guilty.
In a case that became a media sensation.
The prosecution's evidence included a needle allegedly containing traces of insulin, which they claimed Klaus injected Sonny with.
The state will prove was a clandestine, subtle, and ingenious attempt on the part of her husband, Klaus von Bülow, to terminate her life, to murder her.
Klaus appealed this conviction, and during his second trial, expert witnesses testified that the needle was coated with insulin on the outside, but had none inside. They argued that if Klaus had indeed injected Sonny, the needle would have been wiped clean of the insulin. The jury bought this argument and ultimately acquitted Klaus.
The von Bülows were divorced in 1988, and Klaus moved to Europe. As for Sonny, she lingered on in a coma for 28 years, never to regain consciousness.
Number 8, bloodstained underwear, Lloyd E. Miller Jr. murder trial. The phrase gross miscarriage of justice has never been more fitting than in this case. In 1955, taxi driver Lloyd E. Miller Jr. was arrested for the murder of Janice May in Canton, Illinois. The main physical evidence against him was a pair of, quote, blood-stained underwear found near the crime scene. The prosecution convinced the jury that this blood belonged to Miller, leading to his conviction and death sentence. Miller remained on death row for years, once coming within hours of execution when a federal judge ordered a re-examination of the evidence. It turned out that these supposed bloodstains were actually paint. Even worse, the prosecution knew this all along. Miller's conviction was overturned, and he was freed after 11 years behind bars. Number 7, positive identification by victim, Ronald Cotton sexual assault trial.
It's a cliche of courtroom dramas. That moment when the eyewitness is asked, "Do you see the person who committed the crime here in this courtroom before you?"
In July 1984, a man broke into the apartment of Jennifer Thompson and sexually assaulted her at knife point. During the ordeal, Thompson memorized her attacker's physical appearance, determined to identify him later.
What is his voice? Does he have an accent? Does he have a scar? Is there a tattoo?
In both a photo array and police lineup, Thompson picked out Ronald Cotton as the assailant.
I can remember almost feeling like I was at an SAT test. You know, where you start narrowing down your choices. You can discount A and B and...
Oh, like multiple choice.
Exactly.
Her testimony in court was pivotal in securing a conviction. Cotton later appealed this decision and was granted a second trial. However, before this trial began, a felon named Bobby Poole reportedly confessed to the crime. The defense presented Poole to Thompson during the trial, but she insisted that Cotton was the culprit.
Bobby Poole is in the courtroom. You look over there. What happens inside you?
Nothing.
He was subsequently sentenced to life. Nearly a decade later, DNA analysis proved Thompson wrong. Bobby Poole was the real attacker.
You're walking out here today as a free man.
Number 6, SIDS statistics, the trial of Sally Clark. Sally Clark was a solicitor in Cheshire, England, who faced criminal charges for the deaths of her 2 sons. Christopher in December 1996, and Harry in January 1998. Clark's defense argued that both deaths were due to sudden infant death syndrome or SIDS, but the prosecution insisted this was extremely unlikely. Their star witness was Sir Roy Meadow, a professor of pediatrics, who testified that the chances of that happening was 1 in 73 million. This staggering statistic convinced the jury to return a guilty verdict. But Meadows' numbers were deeply flawed.
We don't know the cause of SIDS, but if it's even in part genetic or environmental, it could be possible for babies in the same family to have similar risks.
Even the Royal Statistical Society issued a statement rejecting his claims. Clark's conviction was eventually overturned in a second appeal, after it was also revealed that Harry had, quote, lethal levels of bacterial infection.
When we do statistics, we often only consider one or possibly two different hypotheses. But it's important to remember that there are other options out there. When possible, we should try to consider those other options.
Number 5, blood in the car. The trial of Lindy Chamberlain-Creighton.
Publicly, all over the world, we've been acclaimed as murderers and had that thrust in our face.
One of Australia's most infamous murder trials, Lindy Chamberlain-Creighton stood accused of killing her daughter Azaria during a family camping trip. Azaria's body was never found, and Chamberlain-Creighton insisted a dingo had taken her. An initial inquiry backed the story, but a second inquest suggested otherwise, claiming to have found blood in the family car. At trial, an expert testified that this blood contained fetal hemoglobin, indicating it belonged to a baby. Chamberlain-Creighton was ultimately convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment.
The cheering that went on that night was just unbelievable. It's like being in a Roman gladiatorial stadium.
She had spent 3 years behind bars before being freed when it was revealed that the supposed blood was actually a chemical compound from manufacturing paint. Chamberlain-Creighton was later pardoned and received $1.3 million in compensation from the Australian government.
In 24 hours, you've got, in effect, proof positive that Mrs. Chamberlain was telling the truth on a really significant aspect.
Number 4, Chloroform. The Casey Anthony murder trial.
As bombshell moments go, they don't get any bigger than this.
Do you recall doing any types of searches that might include chloroform?
The Casey Anthony case revolved around allegations that she had killed her daughter Kaylee to escape parental responsibilities. Although physical evidence was scant, prosecutors argued that she used chloroform to commit the crime. They invited software designer John Bradley, who testified that someone had searched for chloroform on the family computer not once, not twice, but 84 times.
Somebody did a search, a specific search for the term chloroform, and then subsequently went to a different website.
The prosecution suggested it was Anthony, but that theory shattered when her mother Cindy testified that she mistakenly searched for chloroform while sourcing information about chlorophyll. Even the medical examiner confirmed that Kaylee's remains tested negative for volatile chemicals. It was revealed that Bradley's software had malfunctioned, and the search for chloroform happened only once.
How many times does it show that that website was visited?
1, sir.
So MySpace was visited 84 times, according to the net analysis report.
That's correct.
By then, Anthony had already been acquitted. Number 3, phone bill. The murder trial of David Camm.
Regardless of where you stand on this issue, it has been a long road to freedom for David Camm.
On September 28, 2000, retired Indiana State Trooper David Camm returned home from a basketball game to find his wife and 2 children dead. He soon became the prime suspect. The murders were estimated to have occurred around 8 p.m., but Camm claimed he was at his game between 7 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. His alibi seemed solid until investigators discovered a phone bill that showed Camm made a call from the house at 7:19 p.m. This voided his alibi, leading to his conviction. However, there was a catch. Because Indiana has 2 different time zones, this call was later determined to have been made an hour earlier at 6:19 p.m. Camm spent 13 years in prison, enduring 2 convictions before being acquitted in a 3rd trial.
When you apply real science, justice is done, but they didn't do that in the beginning. They jumped to some conclusion based on a fraud.
Number 2, kitchen knife, the Amanda Knox trial.
The latest chapter in Amanda Knox's 6-year-long legal battle may just be taking a turn in her favor.
No matter what people say, I didn't do it.
In 2007, Amanda Knox was an American student living in Italy when her flatmate, Meredith Kircher, was murdered. Little did Knox know that this incident would spark a decades-long legal saga. She was charged with Kircher's murder, alleged to have killed her in a botched sex game. Despite little physical evidence, prosecutors fixated on a knife from her boyfriend's house, claiming it held DNA from both Knox and Kircher. This knife became the centerpiece of the prosecution's case and helped secure Knox's conviction.
I had panic attacks and just broke down and I couldn't breathe.
However, on appeal, the knife was re-examined, revealing that the DNA mostly belonged to Knox, with the remaining traces likely due to cross-contamination. Knox was ultimately acquitted, but the shadow of this case continues to loom over her.
It's ordered that Amanda Knox and Raffaele Sollecito be immediately released.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1. Bloodied Gloves: The Murder Trial of O.J. Simpson. The 1995 trial of O.J. Simpson for the murder of his ex-wife Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ronald Goldman is perhaps the most publicized criminal trial in history. While there were multiple pieces of evidence linking Simpson to the crime, the most unforgettable was a pair of bloodied gloves found at the scene. During the trial, Assistant Prosecutor Christopher Darden asked Simpson to try on the gloves, hoping to show they fit him perfectly.
Your Honor, at this time, the people would ask that Mr. Simpson step forward and try on the glove recovered at Bundy as well as the glove recovered at Rockingham.
But in a dramatic twist, Simpson struggled to put them on, indicating to the jury that they were too small. Simpson's defense team capitalized on this, arguing that since the gloves didn't fit, he couldn't have been the killer. The jury agreed and acquitted him of the murders.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder.
What did you think of these notorious legal blunders? Share your thoughts in the comments section.
32 years after Azaria disappeared, the Chamberlains, now both remarried, got what they'd been fighting for when a new coroner found that a dingo was indeed the cause of death.